Well, I want to welcome everybody to the third Friday Sex and Healing Relationship Prodependence webinar where you get to ask lots of questions. So please, I encourage you, if you've got any question at all, regardless of whether or not it's on the topic I'm going to talk about or not, please ask. Again, I like to bring into our webinar what I experience as a family therapist, one who's a CSAT working with betrayed partners. And this is what typically shows up in my groups as well as in my office. So we're going to talk about the dance of denial this week. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to look at it from both the side of how it shows up in the addict partner and also how it shows up in the betrayed partner. You know, denial is very relevant in the prodependent based approach because we need to understand it from a safety perspective in regards of the betrayed partner. She needs that, or he needs that as part of safety. They need to be with an addict partner who is working through their denial and getting to a place where they become accountable. Oftentimes, what we see in the betrayed partner is that they deny certain elements of their situation because it is so complex and traumatic. So they don't even know where to begin. And it's oftentimes easier just to kind of bury your head in the sand to some degree. When the addict partner is denying, oftentimes the betrayed partner will kind of rationalize and kind of minimize what's their experiences in that moment because they want to lessen the impact of what their day-to-day experience is. Because remember, in the beginning days, they're in crisis, those beginning months, and then eventually they're in their betrayal trauma. So it's a real juggling act for the betrayed partner. So denial can be something that they use to help them manage really intense emotions. It's also a way that the betrayed partner can even manage his or her own shame. Because when we're moving out of denial, whether we're a betrayed partner or an addict partner, lots of times we experience shame, or they oftentimes pair up together, which is a really intense combination. The betrayed partner can use it as a self-defense mechanism. In fact, all of us go into denial at some point in our lives around certain issues. And so we are using that as a defense mechanism. But what we find with a betrayed partner is that we can move them out of denial when they have the right kind of loving, caring support. Whether it's the qualified therapist, it's a great support group, it's a family member or friend, it's a community. And that's one of the goals that I have as a therapist working with betrayed partners is when we see denial getting in the way in their healing recovery, how can we work at that? How can we identify it? And I'm going to give you some ideas today on how to work with it for both the betrayed partner and the addict partner. So here's how it shows up in my office. I will oftentimes have betrayed partners come in or either into my office or group, and they will say, you know, my partner, it seems like every time I go to sit down with him and I want to talk about recovery, he's telling me that I need to mind my own business, that I'm not really supposed to be part of his recovery. Okay, so what does that feel like for you? And of course, the client says, well, it feels like I'm powerless. It feels like I don't know what to do. I'm just trying to lovingly support him. And in reality, he's making me feel like I'm doing something wrong. And so in that moment, what my client is facing oftentimes is the addict partner's denial because they don't recognize yet that part of their recovery and their healing is they've got to include their partner or those people close to them as part of their recovery system. And we're going to talk about some ways to do that. The addict partners got to learn how to break through their denial, work on their shame, and then they move into accountability. So one of the teaching pieces I do with the partners and with couples who are dealing, you know, with an addiction is to talk about how denial shows up for each one of them, and then how the shame, kind of going back and forth between shame and denial occurs, and how we can move out of both of those into a place of accountability. So basically, what that betrayed partner who comes into my office and says, my partner won't let me ask about his recovery, what she's really wanting is for him to be accountable by sharing with her what they're doing for their recovery so she can feel safe. What happens though is when you have an addict partner who's in denial and then their shame comes up, it gets very confusing for the betrayed partner. It can even throw them into a crisis for that moment, that day, that week, or it even can throw them back into their betrayal trauma. So you can see we can move in and out of this and it becomes a dance. So one of the things that's really imperative in the recovery for both the betrayed partner and the addict partner is to really recognize the role of denial. Okay, so what is denial? Let's talk about just a few explanations so we're all on the same page. Remember, everybody alters reality. We all like to perceive events according to our own personal perceptions, our own bias, because denial helps us cope with any potential threat, any uncomfortable facts, or any really distressing feelings. So oftentimes we use our denial to help us manage. So we deny reality when the truth would put us in conflict either with ourselves or with our partner. So that's both for the betrayed partner and the addict partner. So denial at times can be a really important strategy. It's kind of an unconscious strategy that keeps us from almost buckling under the weight of what our reality is and having to deal with situations we can't control. So we see that in the beginning, there may be more denial. And then as you're moving on and you're doing recovery work, denial should become less and less and less and less until we get to this place where we are willing to accept our reality, which is a really important part of recovery work. So denial in the betrayed, let me go back. Denial with the addict partner happens because the brain has to justify the behaviors that the addict partner has been engaging in. Sorry, I'll get that out. Okay. Denial is a way to insulate ourselves from the shame, the embarrassment, and the regret of having an addiction. So without even realizing it, the addict partner will kind of go into denial as their shame comes up oftentimes. So kind of moving and dancing back and forth between the two, denial to shame. And denial, we can also use it as a way to prevent us from having to change, which is an unfortunate thing. So oftentimes we will see that the addict partner may deny the intensity, the severity of their addiction because they're really not at a place where they're willing to change and fully change, or they may feel powerless to change. So when we break through denial, either as a betrayed partner or an addict partner, we're finally ready to move on in our life, healing from our betrayal trauma, recovering from our addiction. So what I hear my betrayed partners saying when they show up in the office and in group is that they're dealing with addict partners who don't accept responsibility. So I'll give you some examples in just a moment. They might even blame their problems on the betrayed partner or even on other people. It could be family members, it could be the boss at work, it could be their therapist, it could be a variety of people that they might start blaming. They also see the addict partner not willing to see their contribution to their own problems, or even the contributions to any conflict or disconnection that's happening in the attachment between the betrayed partner and the addict partner. And so consequently, they're not taking accountability for any of their actions. And that's very, very frustrating for the betrayed partner because the betrayed partner just wants to feel safe. And they feel safer once the addict partner is willing to say, yes, I did this. Yes, this is my problem. Here's what I'm doing to fix it. I'm recognizing how it has affected you. That feels safe. And so what they're seeing instead as the addict partner is working through their own denial oftentimes is things like minimizing and rationalizing. They might even see self-deception, like, I'm seeing my addict partner and they're not making sense. The way they see reality is so different. They might manipulate. Of course, we talked about blaming because when there's shame, there's automatically blame and then comparing. So let me give you some examples of what you may come up against as a betrayed partner. One of the ways we use denial is through a behavior of externalization. So we make the problem not about us, either the betrayed partner or the addict partner. We like to project it out and make it about the other person. So I might hear the betrayed partner say, my partner keeps criticizing me and telling me I need to stop having all of these reactions to him, that by now I should be able to be in my recovery, right? Or the addict partner might say, well, the reason I had that slip is because you weren't being very nice to me. So I'm making the problem not about me, I'm externalizing it and making it about somebody else. So that's one example. Another one is justification. So it might be, it's no big deal that I'm missing group tonight. I've been 3 times this month already. And besides, I stayed home from group to catch up on work. And if I don't work, then we don't have food on the table. And so now all of a sudden they're justifying their reasons for not doing the recovery work they need to do. Another one is minimizing. So I see this in both the addict partner and the betrayed partner, and it shows up in group because the addict will say, well, gosh, my addiction's only porn. I don't have sex addiction. I'm not as bad off as the other guys in my group. Or I see the betrayed partner sitting in group comparing stories with other women and going, gosh, maybe I shouldn't be here. My husband just watches porn and I've heard her story and it's so much worse. Maybe it's not as bad off as maybe the situation is as bad as I thought it was at one time. That's minimizing. Blaming shows up. That's another behavior you see. And it might be something like this. You're trying to work my recovery for me. And I don't want you working my recovery for me. I know what I need to do. And you don't really need to tell me what I need to do. So I'll make my appointment with my therapist, and you're making it hard for me to work my recovery steps because you're blaming me all the time, or you're telling me how I'm not doing it right. So we've got to be careful that we don't blame the other person for our lack of recovery work or for any of those times that we might be dysregulated. And it's really about our inability in that moment to work our recovery. So we'll talk about taking accountability in a moment. Manipulating is something like this. I'm not going to focus on my recovery until I see you working on your own recovery. And I'll see this show up with even the betrayed partner. And that is, you know what? I'm not going to get into doing my healing recovery. I don't think I'm going to join group until my partner does. And unfortunately, they say that to their addict partner and they're putting pressure on them. And so they're trying to manipulate their partner into getting into like group or getting into our program because they really need them to get in. And we know that most people, change is only lasting, I would say in all people, if it comes from internal, it's intrinsically motivated. It's not somebody telling me to do it. So that's extrinsic motivation. The other thing that it shows up is in comparing. So we'll see guys in groups compare themselves to others, the progress they're making, how well they're doing. And so they will even come home and share that with their betrayed partners. And sometimes that really minimizes the betrayal that the betrayed partner is experiencing because they're making it sound like, their husbands are doing so much better than the other guys in the group. Okay. So let's talk about how denial shows up in the betrayed partner. Just again, real briefly, I'm going to cover a few things. Again, the betrayed partner can minimize, discount, rationalize, deny, and pretend that things are different because they really want to trust their partner. I see this again and again and again. The partner will come in with some pretty solid facts, right? We kind of weave through all the distorted perceptions. And the fact of the matter is their partner is not really doing recovery. And they want to trust their partner so bad that they sometimes have blinders and they're not willing or ready at that point to really recognize it and see it. Sometimes the betrayed partner, they need to use a little bit of denial because they see the situation, they recognize it, and they don't know what to do with it. So they might only be able to focus on one little aspect because the bigger picture just seems so big. Another thing too is the betrayed partner is flooded with fears, right? That if I step out of denial, then I've got to recognize that I might not feel loved. I might have feelings of abandonment. I might have my own shame that I'm having to deal with. Another reason is as long as the addict minimizes what they've done, then the betrayed partner can rationalize it as well and pretend like things are better than they are, which that's a very common theme. And so as a therapist, working from that through that prodependence lens, I try to show the betrayed partner, is there a better way to view this? Is there a way we can look at maybe a certain aspect of what you're denying and kind of reframe it, put it in a different context? Maybe we can figure out how to approach your partner about it so you can begin to take the very first step rather than staying in denial. Okay, so some examples of what I might hear the betrayed partner say when they come into my office. It might be something like, well, I think that he's having a hard time with his sobriety because work is so difficult for him right now. He's got a really terrible boss. And so he's telling me that he really can't do all his recovery right now because the stress is too difficult with his boss. Or, you know what, we decided that if we move, then it'll probably help him stop his behavior and then he'll get sober. So we're gonna move away from where we're living. Or it might be, you know what, I really shouldn't let the pornography bother me like it does, because at least he's not out there having sex with other women. So that's another way. I see women rationalize. So this even came up in one of my groups this week where they talked about, well, we think all men have this problem. So it's a blanket statement that maybe, to some degree, all men have a problem like this. So what that does is now I don't have to focus on what I'm dealing with. I'm making it very general. Another one might be, you know what? My husband has all of those stupid emails coming in that have, those links to porn, and I know he's not doing it. And, it's got to be those spammers that are doing it. I've heard that as well. And in reality, that may not be the truth. Another way that they can minimize the addiction is by focusing on, my addict partner is such a good dad. He's such a good provider. And so sometimes, because that is really important, and I realize that's part of creating safety, that they sometimes then minimize the other side of it, which is the addictive behaviors that they're engaging in. And another one that comes up a lot is, well, to some degree, it must be my fault because I'm not fulfilling him sexually. So that's how it shows up. Okay, so how do we get out of the dance of denial? First of all, you got to learn about denial. You got to know what it is. A qualified therapist, a CSAT therapist, recognizes how it shows up with a betrayed partner and with the addict partner. So go to them to educate yourself, because they'll give you examples. They'll be able to gently guide you and tell you how it may be showing up. They'll help you to recognize your own behavior. In our program, the men work on a specific book just on breaking through denial for them. We don't specifically work on that in the women's group that are healing from betrayal trauma, but I do work on that individually with many of my clients. So recognize, what are my denial behaviors? And we can do that by kind of taking apart, first of all, being aware of how denial shows up in you. So one of the things that I will do with women when they come into my office is we will talk about what they're seeing happening. So we'll talk about the facts. We'll talk about what they would want to see that would indicate that their partner is in recovery and doing their recovery work that creates safety for the partner. And then the third column is, okay, is there some discrepancy? And if there is, how's that making you feel? Right? So is this really happening? Is this taking you into your trauma? Is this taking you into some distorted thinking of, you know what, I just can't live life without my partner, so I've got to make this work. And if this doesn't work, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then the betrayed partner is projecting into the future. So really recognize, what am I telling myself? What am I seeing? Really be honest with yourself about what you're actually seeing. Check in with what you're actually doing. So how am I dealing with this? If here's what I need and here's what he's doing, what am I telling myself about that? And check in and see if you're in denial. So make that list and compare. How do you recognize denial in the addict partner? Again, we go back to, what am I seeing and hearing my addict partner do? What am I thinking about? What's my perceptions with what they're doing? And in this moment, what do I need? It's really important that you understand those aspects too, because we're going to talk about how you approach then each other to talk about denial, especially the betrayed partner approaching the addict partner. Okay. So one of the things you've got to do is be grounded and be very intentional when you decide you're going to talk with either the betrayed partner or the addict partner about betrayal. I'm going to talk about it right now through the lenses of the betrayed partner. How do I talk to my addict partner about what I see as maybe being denial? So first of all, let's talk about, I like to put boundaries into place before we talk about very difficult and hard things. I find that we usually have more disconnection if we go in ill-prepared. It's very important you prepare. So like I said, you've got to be very grounded. We teach something called fair fighting contracts, in our groups. And a fair fighting contract is just some rules that you establish as you're working through recovery. And those rules are there to really help you stay out of disconnection, out of arguing, out of making things worse than they are or they could be. So here's some of the rules we suggest that a couple sit down and they work on prior to having difficult conversations in the future. Number one, in the fair fighting contract, you've got to both agree to come together to discuss. So if there's any kind of disconnection, if there's any kind of fight, we've got to agree that we're both willing to work on it. Number two, you've got to agree on a time and a place. So let me give you some examples. No fighting before work, no fighting right before we go to bed, no fighting after 9 p.m., no fighting in our bedroom. And I had somebody in group say this week, yeah, but that's the only place we can go where we have privacy. So we came up with, don't sit on the bed to fight, bring chairs in so you're sitting facing each other. And they even came up, if you've got a big walk-in closet, go into your walk-in closet then, if you can't sit at the kitchen table to do it. So find that safe, neutral space where you can sit and have a difficult argument. Set a time limit on your fight. This is really, really important. I find that 20 to 30 minutes should be pretty sufficient in trying to work through one issue. So I like to tell my clients, set a timer. If you're at that point where we're into it, we're just about to get it wrapped up, go ahead and finish. If not, then take the pause and the time out, maybe come back around the next night to continue. And I also make a recommendation of sharing before you end. If you haven't finished up the discussion that you're trying to work through, then let your partner know before it ends, here's what I need you to consider, or here's what I need when we come back. So each partner shares their need. So when you come back together, you start at that point. Okay, another one. You may need to fight in front of a third party if necessary. So if you're just going round and round and round and you're both disagreeing, then at that point, agree to disagree and get back in and see your couples therapist, or go to your groups and get some input, but most likely if we want somebody there to be as a witness and a third party, then you're going to want to do that in a therapist's office. Okay. Of course, you don't want to fight in the presence of your children or have these really hard discussions where they can be overheard. So really make sure there's a lot of privacy. And at any time you're having a difficult discussion, there should be no physical, verbal, emotional aggression, or any kind of violence. So we've got to stay grounded. That's really, really important. Okay. The other thing that you need to establish before you have a discussion about denial is you have to have an agreement to take a time out if things aren't going well. If either one of you are getting emotional, then you need to call a pause and say, hey, we need to go get grounded. Let's come back in 20 minutes. Let's finish this after dinner. Let's do this in the morning after the kids have gone to school. But come up with that agreement that if either one of us are emotional, we're going to call the pause, the timeout, but you must come back within 24 hours to continue. Again, I love the idea of when I come back with a plan. That's where I love using journaling. I love writing down what it is you want to address. So, one of the things you're going to do with your journaling is you're going to use the talking boundary that I've mentioned multiple times, where you're sharing what you're seeing and hearing. You're going to share what your thinking is about that, or the story you're telling yourself, or what you're making up about what you see and hear, how that makes you feel. And then you're going to express the need or the boundary in that you need from your partner. I love it when my group members come in and they'll say, "Hey, I talked with my partner about something really, really hard. I'm usually so dysregulated, but I sat down and I journaled using these 4 steps. I slept on it. I came back the next day and I brought my journal in and I read directly from my journal. And my husband could sit and hear me and he understood and he told me what he could do to help me feel safer." I think that is really kind of a win-win situation because both people remain grounded, there's understanding, and now we've created connection in that moment. So go in very prepared. I know that when we have a limbic response, when our brain gets hijacked, because we're hearing our partner deny something that you know is true, and it may be as something as simple as, "I never said that," and the betrayed partner gets really triggered in that moment. I know it's going to take some of your own recovery work to stop and get regulated and then be able to come back and sit down and respond in a very grounded manner rather than reacting. So you've got to be very aware of that. So that self-awareness is another piece. Be very aware of where you're at. If you need to take the pause and figure out what's going on for you, then journal it. Be very, very clear and very specific in what you're seeing. Be factual. If you're hearing your partner deny, go in with curiosity. That's another thing I love. And that is, I hear you saying that your addiction isn't as bad as the other guys in group. Well, I'm curious why you would say that. Because in that way, you're going to hear them talk and the addict partner is going to share. And sometimes in that, they're going to realize that they're in denial and what they're saying isn't really logical. So we can use that. The other thing is, besides using the talking boundary, remember when we use the talking boundary, we're using a lot of I statements rather than you statements. The reason I like that is because shame can really kick in. I talked about how they go hand in hand. So you've got to know when shame shows up. Usually one of you will be defensive. One of you will want to leave and get away as fast as they can. Shame shows up that way. Or one partner will shut down. They won't be able to talk. They won't know what they're thinking. They won't be able to communicate. And so kind of step back and question, is this shame showing up? Don't use accusatory words. Don't call people names. Don't belittle. That's why I love the talking boundary, because we keep that. My internal perspective is this. But denial is going to be a part of recovery for both the addict partner and the betrayed partner. And oftentimes we don't do enough education, at least for the betrayed partner, on this to recognize it when it shows up for themselves and with their partners and how to work through it. So that's why I thought, as it showed up in my office and in group this week, that it would be a great thing for us to talk about.
And as usual, you were correct. I was thinking, again, so much, but like you used the example of like, I never said that. And so I played in my mind, if someone said, well, you said, rather than, what I heard you say is this. Did I get that correct? Well, then there's space for clarification. Now, going back to the denial, though, I was like, I mean, like on all sides of this, like I was like, I had a zillion examples going through my mind, and yeah, the addicts, absolutely, shut down and blame shift, and I've heard, just like you were saying, I'm not as bad, or my husband isn't as bad because he only looks at porn, and sometimes, they haven't really gone through, it's just been kind of discovery, and that's what's been found. So I'm always going like, well, there may be more, but even if it is, it's still a betrayal if it was done secretively and everything else. So it isn't about the level of it's like, in AA, well, I only drank beer, so I'm not as bad as the people who drank whiskey. It still is. What's it doing to me, to my relationships and everything else? And so it isn't, and I know whatever, addiction is happening, if you're looking at how you don't connect, you can
Mm.
always find, my story is never going to be exactly the same as everyone else's, but I can sit, I've had a very stressful few weeks. Guess where I've been extra? At my 12-step meetings, connecting and listening to other people's stories and going, yes, I can relate to those feelings. The examples of the stuff, sometimes not, doesn't matter, but that, all of those, I can relate to, to the feelings and the struggles to learn to do life on a different level. So I was thinking, when you go, you got three fingers pointing back at you. I read this in my meditation this week, and I was like, I had forgotten that, like, if you do this, you still have three fingers pointing. So if you're blaming somebody else, if you're pointing the blame at someone else, guess what? There's three fingers going, yeah, it really is about me. And my journey has been leaning heavy again into, it always is, but it's a little extra heavy, into the serenity prayer. What do I have control over? My actions and my reactions. That's it. I can't control, anyone else's. I loved what you're talking about, the fair fighting. And I did write down too, the time and place, not in the car. I can't tell you how many people are traumatized because somebody's driving down the road and they're trapped. They're trapped in the car and somebody brings up this stuff. I've had people go, I'm not going to ride with that person anymore because every time I'm in the car, they do this type of thing. So I was like, yeah, the closet sounds like a way better choice, and I really think being productive about, okay, we got to a stuck place, we're going to journal, we're going to come back, but not going right back to the beginning of the argument again. Like, this is where we got stuck. So let's, I've journaled, I thought about it. This is what I'm looking for, and even the, well, I'm not going to work on my recovery if you're not going to do that, and I was like, at some point, it's that you talked about the dance, and I was like, it's the negative dance. It's the negative two-step of, we're doing the same patterns. And at some point, if you keep doing the same things, you're going to get the same results. And why would I not want healing for myself, regardless of what somebody else is choosing to do or not do? I mean, at some point, I have to, and you've shared this before, healthy boundaries, for me, they're about my safety. I have to value myself enough to go, regardless of what someone else is doing, I value me and I'm going to put myself first. I also put down that, I know partners, I hear this a lot. I don't want to be a trigger, and so I'm not going to confront anything. I'm not going to confront the denial because I don't want to be a trigger, because then he's going to go relapse if I do that. And they also have shared that they don't want to be seen as a bad wife or a bad mom or whatever, and so they're dealing with the perception of what will people think, if they don't stay in that minimization and rationalization and denial. So there's a lot, but I really think, addiction all the way around is so much about denial and yeah, but recovery is such an amazing and beautiful thing. And like, people who are very much living in denial and blaming and rationalization, it's like, you can learn and you can have a connected relationship where you're dealing with each other in meaningful, tender ways where you're valuing each other. Why would we not all want to strive for that in all of our relationships? So great stuff. This will be another one of those that I'm pointing out to people. So okay, questions. If your spouse doesn't have a CSAT, what is a good way to say you would like him to? This is APSATS trained. Why do I need my addict partner to make me feel safe if he chooses not to take care of why do I need my addict partner to make me feel safe? If he chooses not to, can't I take care of that myself?
Absolutely. So there's two parts to this question. I want to start with, if your spouse doesn't have a CSAT, how do you approach them? I really love the talking boundary for this because you can share so much. Remember, with that talking boundary, you can just share, I see you going to therapy, and you can even validate. I appreciate the fact that you're doing that. and that you're going 2 times a month, and that you're willing to come home and talk to me about what you're doing. However, along with that, the story I'm going into as well is that my husband will be doing so much better if only he'd go see somebody who's a CSAT, because I know a CSAT has special qualifications. They really understand addiction and the best steps for recovery that is really tailored to somebody with a porn or sex addiction. And right now, at this point, when I see you going to your therapist, it is creating some safety, but I'm not feeling secure and really, really safe, because I really want to feel like you and I are recovering together. So remember, if you're wanting your partner to also see a CSAT, my recommendation is you do the same, so that then you guys can recognize together that some of your recovery is going to be parallel in a lot of ways, as far as learning how to communicate and create connection, like Tammy just talked about. I love that connection framework. We can connect in our recovery this way, right? And so just, would you please consider seeing a CSAT? Just think about that. And maybe we can come back together later today to talk about it, or tomorrow. And I'd just like to get your ideas. So basically, you want to remain open. You want to not tell them how they need to do it. The fact is, he is seeing a therapist. So we do want to validate that if he is seeing a therapist. If he isn't, then I would go into my fears. Here's what my fear's telling me. Right? Here's how it feels in my body. So I'm really sharing my internal experience. Also, you might want to educate yourself on why going to a CSAT is important if you haven't done that already, because your partner who's not seeing a CSAT may question, why would I want to go see a CSAT? Why is that so necessary? I feel like I'm doing good work with this person. So make sure that you understand that as well. Again, on that, as a betrayed partner, we can make vulnerable requests if we see that them not going to a therapist or not seeing the right kind of therapist is creating a safety issue. Then you can step into putting a safety boundary into place. And that's a whole nother thing to talk about as far as boundaries go. But it might be that, if you're not going to a therapist, you don't feel safe for me. And so you're going to see me pulling away at times in order to create safety for myself. So that's really a boundary. If you see a therapist, then it's going to be easier for me, to feel like you're safe, and you'll see me moving towards you. And again, it's the addict partner's choice as to how they do their recovery. And the unfortunate thing is, as a betrayed partner, we can oftentimes be more logical in how we see recovery needing to happen. Because remember, we don't have an addiction. We're connected to our prefrontal cortex. We've got logic and reasoning. You're dealing with an addict partner who's been working out of that limbic part of their brain with their addiction. And so it is hard at times as a betrayed partner just to sit back and let the addict partner figure out their recovery journey. But it's okay for you along the way to say, here's what I need to feel safe and secure.
Well, and I think, oh, no, I was going to say, and to the part about the making you feel safe, I don't think we can make each other feel anything. Right. I think what you were just talking about, Debbie, though, was, with my healthy boundaries, I'm going to take care of my safety. That just means I won't be as connected to you, right?
It will feel more safe for me, correct? This situation
right.
feels safer. If I see you do this, then you would appear to me to be safer. And then I'm going to be more likely to want to move towards you when I feel safe. That's basically the rule of attachment, right? We want to move towards the people that make us feel safe and secure. So we can very much, as a betrayed partner, share, here's what I need for safety. And here's why. We talked about that this week in group. I loved this. And that is explaining the why. Sometimes we tell our addict partner, you need to do this and you need to do that. But we don't share, here's why I need this for safety and security. And remember, boundaries are not meant for punishment or control. So as that betrayed partner, gosh, how can I verbalize this So I'm not controlling, I'm not punishing you, but I'm just sharing with you, this would feel safe for me. So I hope that kind of helps clarify too.
Yeah, well, and as far as the season, I mean, they have special training. They can provide, the client with assessments that will help them really guide the treatment plan for the client. They have, I mean, most therapists don't have addiction training, or have very little. So they're lacking on addiction, and this is a highly specialized area. There's 20 different subtypes of sex addiction, so it's not like, but it's applying the wrong lens. When I have skin cancer, which I've had, where I go? The dermatologist, because they're able to address that. Not my general practitioner. Love my general practitioner, but when I need a specialist, I'm going to the specialist. I want the best help. So I think it would also be, what is your spouse doing in conjunction with just seeing a non-CSAT therapist? If they're daily going to groups, and they've got a sponsor, and they've got their, they've been working the steps, and they've got their 3-circle plan, and I mean, they're really solid in recovery, then maybe a generalist therapist is able to help them in some aspects of that. So I don't know, but I hear often from addicts or from partners about their addicts that they like their therapist, and I was like, because cognitive behavioral therapy is about accountability. And if you're just going and talking about your trauma, and you're getting support from your really lovely therapist who's going like, oh, I understand, it's not accountable. Okay, you've got trauma, but what are you doing to make sure you're not traumatizing your partner right now? Like, and then the focus is like, oh, it's on my behavior versus on my trauma from, decades ago. And so like, it feels like the hot seat on some level. And like when people go, my husband loves his therapist, I get a little red flag of, because like, you should respect them, but you should also go, they're holding me accountable. They want me to step up for my benefit, not about them, for my benefit. So I guess it depends more on what's the overall picture, for that person too. So.
Yeah, and that second part of that question, just real briefly, it's a very simple answer, and that is, if your partner can't create safety for you, then yes, it is up to you as the betrayed partner to create safety for yourself. And that is often the case in the early days of betrayal trauma recovery. And that is, your partner may not be able to show up for you. So you find those people who can, you figure out how you can show up for yourself. And then as trust is reestablished, hopefully we can create more of a shift where you can turn to your partner more and more, and it does feel safe and secure. So just wanted to finish that.
That's great. Okay, 1 year out from first D-Day, 5 months from learning about PASA, part of my partner's addictive behaviors beyond sexual betrayal was how he told other people that I wasn't a good mom, how he was going to leave me and I wasn't a good partner to him. That was really sinking into me now, or that is really sinking into me now. He never shared that with me. I'm out of denial and actually seeing his perspective in his addiction. How can I believe him now when he says he doesn't feel that way truly?
Well, you're only 1 year out from your first D-Day. And I guess 5 months from learning about these behaviors, I'm assuming, it takes time. I wish there was I could give you 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to do, and it would help you, but it's really about time. And we talk about, you've got to see him, showing up consistently, doing his recovery work over time before you begin to reestablish trust. And so you've got to see congruency. What I really love is, I love Brene Brown's acronym Braving. And so I would recommend you go watch her video on the anatomy of trust, because she gives you some specific traits, qualities, and behaviors you look for in people that you can trust. And so that is one way. Oftentimes I will use that as a framework to talk about Are you seeing really healthy boundaries? Are you seeing reliability, that consistency? Are you seeing the accountability? Is there a vault there where they're not sharing anything like what you just shared? I mean, that's somebody going out and sharing stuff about you that should have been kept in a vault if he felt that way and worked with you later on. Is there integrity? Is there non-judgment? And is there generosity? So that is a really great way to kind of provide maybe a framework, a starting point for you to understand, what do I look for and how can I truly believe him, saying he doesn't feel this way. Well, you're going to want to see him showing up authentically and honestly, consistently over time while he's doing his recovery work before you can start to believe that that's how he truly feels. So that, off the top of my head, that would be one of the things I would talk to my clients about.
And I am a 12-stepper. This to me would be on his 8th and 9th step. This would be a part of his amends. Is like, to me, it would be him going back to the people that he spread this crapola to, and saying, I was not in a bad place, or I was in a bad place. And, as part of that, I said some really derogatory things about my partner who, is a great mom. And I mean, whatever. But to me, that would be taking ownership of it. That's just me. But that would be on my recovery. That, I'm going like, if that was me, I had to do, I had to do some really difficult conversations with people about, my behaviors and my actions, and that would be an amends to you, but in a, not just saying, oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel that way now. Like, that would be cleaning up the wreckage of my past. So that's my
Yeah,
thought on that
a
one.
lot of times betrayed partners, when we're going through, and let's say we're doing a formal therapeutic disclosure. And part of that process is the addict partner taking accountability for the behaviors and the actions and the ways that their addiction has really affected the betrayed partner. And that might be something that you ask him to include as part of his accountability, because there is healing for us. That's one of the healing steps in the partner recognizing the effect that it's had on you and taking accountability and ownership of the pain that it's created for you. So I love what you said, Tammy, too. I think that takes it even deeper.
Yeah, well, but it would be for me as an addict,
Well,
taking complete responsibility that I was disparaging to someone else, and it was really all about me. So, okay. And thanks and gratitude for sex and relationship healing for leading me to the best therapist. I feel so fortunate. That's great. Yes, I do. People often are emailing me, Tammy at Seeking Integrity, TAMI. And if you give me where you're located, I will do my best to help you find. Not everybody works from a prodependent lens, so it is challenging to find, and there's CSATs and lots of them are great. And I refer to lots of them, and there's some of them that I would never refer to. I mean, when I was working for that organization, there was lots of them that I was like, they're doing the work. They really care about clients. They want to help. And then there's others that was like, it's like, I just can't, in good integrity, recommend them. So I will do my best, but you get to pick. So, okay. If I want to support a fellow friend who is also a betrayed partner who is in denial, what would be a good way to talk with her? That's a great question. Like, if you're seeing something,
yeah.
and oh, wow.
Now, this
Okay.
actually showed up in my office this week. I had somebody who said, oh, I've got a friend. I know she's going through what I'm going through. I tried talking to her and she was so closed. I want to be there to support her. What can I do? So this is a really hard one, because I'm assuming that, you've been working on your recovery, so you've got a different perspective. And if you can go back and kind of think of maybe the early days when you were in denial and just kind of come from that place of compassion, and all you can do is offer. At this point, you could, even if this is somebody who is trustworthy to you and you can place your trust in other words, they've earned the right to your vulnerability, then you might share what your experience has been. You don't have to get into details. I don't believe, honestly, in going deeply into our stories. When we're in recovery, we can kind of give an overview. We can share what we're healing on. But oftentimes when we get into all the gruesome details again and again and again, it's not the healthiest thing because oftentimes it'll throw us back into our triggers. We'll get triggered or into a trauma response. So we can share, here's been my experience, here's what I've been dealing with. If you can relate to what I've gone through and some of the things that, I'm doing, or if you want to know, I'm here for you. Offer yourself as a resource person. But if they don't take you up on it, then it's okay. It may be you've just planted the seed, you've made yourself available, and when the time comes and they're ready, because we all have to be ready at some point to finally do whatever work we need to do, then they know that you're there. So we've got to just step into that place of compassion. We can be vulnerable with them. We can offer to support them. And then your friend may, open up at that time. And really, it's about building trust to begin with. And then along the way, when she's really open and honest about what she's dealing with, then that might be the time to refer her to resources to learning about denial, or you can share, here's what helped me in these different areas. And so again, somebody's got to be ready. And I know sometimes when we're healing and we recognize how wonderful it is and that it's changed our life in so many wonderful ways, we do want to share that. But a lot of people just aren't ready. So it's wonderful that she's got you as a friend and you're there for her whenever she needs you.
Yeah, I agree, and it's difficult to be on the sidelines and you see things unfolding, but
Mhm.
you can't do anything about it. So, okay, it makes me really sad that the answer mostly is for us to go to a therapist when there are so many that can't afford it. Mine, or ours is at least $400 to $500 a week and more with groups. I understand the value of going to therapy that specializes in sex addiction and betrayal trauma, but it would be wonderful if CSATs would make up a collective group to donate 30 minutes a week to a person in need. There is a program that gives sex addicts or partners free help. So I can answer this. There are many people who have, they will do one person, but they have to have a limit. I mean, these people have, people go, oh, sliding scale, and I've heard of people who are driving, I'm not kidding, driving off in their Mercedes and the therapist is, in their little Honda or something, so it's one of those things where they have worked hard on they've invested a lot of money and a lot of time in getting the education to get their license in the first place. And then their CSAT on top of that. The CSAT is 150 hours and then renewals. And so but I do know many therapists have like a spot where they're doing a pro rata or whatever, but it has to be balanced. They have to have good boundaries with that too. So, and at some point, investing heavily, maybe more at first, and then tapering off could be really useful, so what are your thoughts?
Well, Sex and Healing Relationship has some wonderful resources. So you
We
have
do, yeah.
CSATs, that are so accessible and for either low cost or even free webinars all the time. I would really encourage you to do that. I know at the agency I work at, we have a foundation we work with. So when people are in need, we do offer scholarships. And so there are a lot of groups out there. So I would encourage you to check and see if there are any CSAT groups out there who offer some type of a scholarship program. Or like you said, some people will do, some pro bono. And again, they do
Mm-hmm.
have only so many they can do. And some
Mm-hmm.
places do have a sliding scale. And so, do your best to find, the best therapist you can. If you can't get to a CSAT supplemented with some of
Mm-hmm.
these other webinars and drop-in groups that don't cost a lot. And I think there's just so many really wonderful resources out there, but I'm hoping you can find somebody out there, a CSAT, who offers, a way for you to be able to afford it. It is expensive. I hear this all the time. You're not the only one who feels this way.
But ultimately people can, it's harder, I'm not gonna lie, but you can get in recovery just with 12 step, and we've got our free drop-in groups and all of these other resources. But lots of people get sobriety on whatever level, through 12 steps. But it's not like, well, I went to my 12 step once a week. You have to really up the level of getting support and figuring out a plan for yourselves to do that. And we've got multiple betrayed partner groups. It's not therapy, it's not treatment, but there's lots of resources that are low cost. The work groups, $350 for a 6-week live facilitated group, 90 minutes a week. I mean, that's a great value, to really get, foundational. Those are all on seeking integrity. So there's lots of low cost too. But at the end of the day, like people come to our treatment program. Does everybody need to come to treatment? No. Would lots of people benefit from it? Yes. But if you can afford to do that, man, to have that foundation so much faster, and a plan and the support, rather than spending, 12 to 24 months trying to figure it out. I mean, it's just, but I understand, and I have been in recovery for a long time. I know lots of people that have never seen a therapist, and can find a path. So it is doable. You just have to really work on, getting a plan. Okay, we got 2 more. Can trust be rebuilt without check-ins and a formal therapeutic disclosure?
I believe it can. I also believe that it's going to take longer. Most of the betrayed partners I work with, they do find that the check-ins help them along the way, because we want to communicate, we want to connect and know what our partner's doing. They want to rebuild connection. However, there's other things, like I talked about earlier with the BRAVING acronym, that we can look for that indicate not everybody does a formal therapeutic disclosure. I have some of my clients that don't feel a need. They just kind of go with their intuition. Their intuition is intact. They feel like, they're in a good place where, if something does come up, they know they've got the skills and tools to manage it. So I do believe that trust can be rebuilt. Like I said, you might have to put into place some other things for you. It might be, okay, maybe we're going to go and work together in couples therapy and see if we can figure out specifically some ways to rebuild trust. Maybe it's not this way. It might be that, you're both going to watch Anatomy of Trust together and kind of come up with a way that you're going to kind of work on, having all those qualities. So I do believe that there are some ways that you can rebuild trust. And that, and just in a nutshell, kind of gives you a couple of ideas.
Well, and I think a betrayed partner articulating what they're looking to see, like concrete things, like these actions, they'll be visible. So I think you can start to see that too. Okay, last question. My SAPA is frequently placing his 16-year-old daughter's wants above everyone else's needs, including his own. Once a week on his day off, either Mondays or Fridays, I ask him to watch a webinar Q&A with me and do Fanos. He just walked away from this because she is texting and calling and trying to leave without permission. How can I explain that I need an hour for us to be the focus when he claims we are always the focus, but my reality is his daughter is always the focus?
Okay. Very complicated situation. The thought I had is, when addicts have problems with boundaries, that's just a fact. And this is a boundary issue. And it goes in many different directions, not only with him, but with his daughter. And it sounds like it's very complicated. You may want to find somebody who understands boundaries very well, your therapist. I would recommend the two of you go in and see a couples therapist on this, because oftentimes it sounds to me like it's his daughter, not your daughter. So I'm assuming we've got a blended relationship. So that's got its own situations, because I do work with blended families. So there's a lot of different things there, which, there's a lot of boundaries around there, and how, there's a lot of push and pull with boundaries when it's my children versus his, and how do we come together? But then along the way, addicts have a poor time with boundaries, and they have to learn how to reestablish boundaries. So I don't believe that you're going to be able to do it without a third party and without help. So I guess it would be, could you go to him, use the talking boundary, and make that vulnerable request that we go to a therapist, and let's figure out how we can find a balance here, where I feel supported by you and you feel like I'm supporting you and your daughter, and we can figure out the boundaries that are going to work for us so that we remain connected. If you'll make it about connection, make it about win-win, if you can come from that, here's how it benefits me, here's how it benefits you, you're going to get him on board. So like I tell the women in my groups, make it win-win. So really approach it logically, state why it's going to help you feel safe, how it's going to help you feel connected, and how he's going to feel more connected to you as well, hopefully, because you're going to be safe. So that's kind of where I would, start to unpack the different layers that you've got.
And it is complicated, and there's always guilt with it, in a situation, with a blended family and things like that. So I think that was a very wise suggestion. Okay, we are past time. Thank you all for joining us. Debbie, as always, fantastic information. I look forward to seeing you next month, which will be here before you know it. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, take care.
Bye.